Hi, Darril, Roberto, and Satchel. Thank you so much for joining me for this symposium conversation based on this week's premiere, which was inspired by Darril Tighe's painting, Equanimity. Um, so, Darril, I'd like to start with you. Why were you inspired to submit Equanimity to the symposium? Can you tell us a little bit about the background of the painting?
Yes, let me see. Um, the painting, I think I might have told you in a text, is unusual for me. I don't have an image of it right now, so I was trying to get an image copy, but I'm not very good with computers. Um, I have been inspired by the word equanimity because of some of the Buddhist practices I have been doing, and equanimity for me is a lovely, lovely word, meaning calm, psychologically available to um, do well with either negative things or positive things and keep a certain cool. And in Buddhism, what I like the best about the definition of equanimity, let me find it here. And it's such a beautiful word to me because it really means being centered, having composure. Um, hmm, can't find it. And it's one of the attributes of psychology of Buddhism teaching. And so I was painting this painting. Usually I don't necessarily have an idea. Just start to paint. And what I do when I start to paint is I have an idea of what colors I would like to use. And I knew that I would like to use red. And another technique I have is to use squares to contain the paintings that I do. And then sometimes I completely get rid of squares. But this one, the squares in the red on the right-hand side of the painting is a technique I've used. And then I also use a gesture. So I did some gestures and then I followed it up with having a few tilted squares in yellow on the left-hand side of the painting. And what's unusual for me is that I left a lot of white space. Usually I fill up the whole paper. And I was working on Arches paper with Winsor Newton colors, watercolors. And I spent probably a month just staring at the painting, trying to decide whether it was finished or not. And it took me a long time to come to terms with the fact that it was finished. It was balanced. The white of the paper was the light of the experience. The red shows passion, and passion balanced with squares of yellow, and then also dark gestures of black and yeah, stuff like that. And I just kept on working with it. And then I put my paintbrush down and started to look at it. And I was, in the end, satisfied that it was finished and it did represent a state of mind of calmness, of composure, of love, of compassion. And I consider it a gentle painting. And it's all watercolor. After that painting, I started mixing other paintings with watercolor and enamel. So this one is pure watercolor. And I decided it was finished. I guess I'm rambling here, but that is what I decided.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that process with us. And Roberto, so what drew you in? when you were looking at this painting and made you decide to work with it for your symposium premiere?
Yeah, sure. So I guess as I was going through the submissions and sort of like looking at a lot of Darril's work as well, like I went on your website and looked at the portfolio of work that you have on there as well. And I was really sort of drawn in by this idea of, I guess what I see in your paintings is sort of these, I guess I describe as these sort of like shifting temporalities or nodes of color and texture that have points of intersection and that sort of create these very like multi-layered temporalities, and especially the piece equanimity, I guess I found particularly interesting because of the way that you left basically the blank sort of canvas to sort of permeate through these different areas and sort of in a way, I guess, emphasize or sort of bring out the textures and the colors. This piece, Metaxas 2, is the second in an ongoing series of pieces that all share this title of Metaxas. I started this series about a year ago, I think, and this was when I was first starting to experiment with like various forms of aleatoric and sort of indeterminate or improvisationally based composition. And I chose the title of Metaxas. It's basically the Platonic idea that structurally the human condition is sort of grounded in this reality, but we're also suspended within this sort of web of existential polarities. And so the idea for this series is to create these, I guess, to investigate these sort of liminal spaces for performance and for sound, in a way that's, I guess, not totally pre-orchestrated, not totally predetermined by myself as the composer, but sort of allowing the sound to sort of grow and to bloom into these sort of rhizomes that interact without the need for, sort of staunch predetermination. And so this piece in particular, Metaxas 2, the initial idea for this came to me when I initially started this series, and it was sort of, I guess, the very first conceptualization of it was just a very like free form improvisation based on a certain set of harmonics between two guitars, with audio processing that happens in real time, which sort of, in a sense, fills the space that would be silence between the two guitars, but in a sense, it sort of subverts this, I guess, negative space into these like shifting sort of textures that interact with the two guitars. And after a while, I went through a pretty long process with this piece too. I was initially pretty happy with the idea, and then I decided that I wanted it to be different in some way, but I didn't know what. So I spent some time over the summer just sort of basically workshopping all these different like incomplete iterations of the piece. And I eventually decided to scrap it because I was not happy with how it was going. And it wasn't until I became a part of this symposium and I chose Darril's piece that I thought, this might be a good chance to sort of drawing, from your painting, from what I know about your process, and sort of just revisiting this piece. And I'm pretty happy with the final result. I think this was a good time to revisit and a good way to make this piece into something that I guess it wasn't before.
Thank you for that, Roberto. And so this is for two guitars, and is there an electronic component as well?
Yeah, so it's for two classical guitars, and it's basically two sections, and within each section, basically the only sort of unifying factor between the two guitars is the duration of the section, and the guitars improvise based on these different patterns, or what I call these rhizomes, within each section. And the way we recorded it is we had, like two main mics, which were just recording our guitars like you normally would record. And then we also had contact microphones that we attached to the back of our guitar. And that's the signal processing element. So it goes basically into my computer, and I have my DAW Reaper. And I'm basically just using a bunch of like audio plugins that I arranged and used in a certain way. There's various delays and echo generators and layered reverbs, as well as some pitch shifting. And so it creates this sort of interactive texture that can actually get quite out of hand in real time when you're performing with it. But it's a lot of fun.
So that brings me to Satchel. So what has this process been like for you to come on and perform and premiere this piece by Roberto that's based on this work of Darril's, and how has the painting informed the process of understanding or feeling in connection with the new composition, or anything you want to add about that for you?
Sure. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, yeah, Roberto and I have been working together for a couple of years now. We studied together, and we've had a duo. We've performed a few times, so working with him was kind of second nature at this point. It was a lot of fun to work on one of his projects, which we haven't done necessarily before, and also to sort of engage so much, cross-disciplinary with Darril, and then also with electronic media, which we haven't done in our duo before. It's also interesting to hear both of them speak about it. It's both the pieces, even though, or I guess I could say both the pieces are really kind of akin in that they're sort of this exploration of separate esoteric terms, and over a really long period of time. I know Roberto says it was a year ago, and I remember when he first came to me with this idea of exploring this, metaxis, and maybe having a series about it. And there's a lot of a lot of similarities to Darril's term, the equanimities, even just this sort of the palindromic nature of the piece, where the first half really balances out the second half. And you can really see that in the video that Roberto made, sort of through editing and processing, as well as just compositionally. It's a very, very balanced piece, and it's very pale and rounded in some ways, which I think really lends itself to Darril's painting and Darril's concept there. It was a lot of fun. It was really fortunate we got to sort of work on it together in the same space. Originally we were planning on doing it remotely, but it was really nice to be in that space together and have the processing be in real time, and to be able to respond to one another.
And so Satchel and Roberto, the two of you are at Yale right now. Is that correct? Or are you?
I currently am. Satchel graduated, but yeah.
Okay.
I'm free. They let me go.
Congratulations, Satchel, for graduating.
Thank you. Class of 2020.
So where did the two of you record this?
At his apartment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Roberto's in New Haven, and Satchel, where are you at the moment?
I'm in Brooklyn.
Okay. And Darril, you are in?
Oakland, California.
I'm originally from the West Coast, so we're keeping it,
Yeah, me too.
One more thing I was thinking that just struck me as Satchel, based on what you were saying, is I'm wondering if Roberto and Darril, if you were in contact about sort of your inspirations in your process during this process of Roberto creating this new composition, or if you just kind of arrived at these things individually, and now we're meeting and they all make sense, or did you have a dialogue going?
Roberto emailed me, and I told him I would respond right away, and then I dropped the ball due to circumstances.
To be fair, I did like that. My reaching out to you was sort of later in the process after the deal had been completed.
That's good.
Yeah, and so in a sense, I guess the way the situation played out sort of goes along the lines of like the sort of indeterminacy and the sort of aleatoric nature of this process. So I'm actually it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I was happy to hear from you. I just moved very slowly.
It's all right. I mean,
it's also difficult for me as a painter to put things into words, to talk about my painting with language, and I love the fact that a composer can look at my work and feel something and do something about it. I feel very grateful for that process.
Well, thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems to have been helpful that you both sort of had terms as touchstones. You both had, singular terms. So there's kind of words involved.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's always interesting because it's every week, it's also very different, the amount of contact that happens between the visual artists, performers, and the composers. But I'm just struck by how things seem to have fell into place. Um, just based on your, I mean, just based on having the painting and, as you mentioned, Satchel, like equanimity. Um, and I'm just really grateful for all of your participation this week, and I'm really looking forward to sharing what you created with our audiences. So, um, if there's anything else you'd like to mention that we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah, no, this is, I mean, this is fantastic. I mean, it's great talking to you, Audrey and Darril, also here, getting to hear you sort of speak about like this piece in particular is really interesting. And yeah, I guess this is also sort of the first time that I've actually had to like talk about my music also. So it's like, it's sort of weird in a way, like trying to like explain, what this
Yeah,
piece is,
I
what this,
understand. Yeah.
but yeah, it's really exciting. I'm so happy to be a part of this, and I hope you all find the piece interesting, exciting.
Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm just really looking forward to this.